Sarah, a 20-year-old orphan, was forced to marry a wealthy businessman. But after the wedding, she ran away from home and changed her own destiny. A new story. The heavy silk of the wedding dress felt less like a fairy tale and more like a beautifully crafted cage. I remember the weight of it on my shoulders, the intricate beading digging into my skin every time I moved. The reception was in full swing at Richard Sterling's palatial estate in Montecito, California. A sea of perfect smiles, expensive suits, and the quiet clinking of glasses filled the air. But all I could hear was the frantic pounding of my own heart. This wasn't my wedding, it was a business merger, and I was the primary asset being acquired. Richard stood beside me, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. To everyone else, he was the picture of a doting groom, handsome, successful, charming. At 45, he was more than twice my age, with silvering temples and eyes the color of a winter sky, cold and assessing. "You look breathtaking, my dear," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that didn't quite reach those chilling eyes. He squeezed my waist gently, a subtle reminder of ownership. I forced a smile that felt brittle, like it might shatter and fall from my face. My Aunt Carol caught my eye from across the grand ballroom. She raised her glass in a toast, her face flushed with triumph. After my parents passed away in a car accident when I was 17, she became my guardian. She was also the trustee of the inheritance they'd left for me, a fund I wouldn't get full access to until my 21st birthday. Over the last year, she'd painted a grim picture of dwindling finances, bad investments she'd made on my behalf, and the looming threat of destitution. Then Richard Sterling entered the picture. He was a family friend I'd never met, a savior who could secure my future. "He adores you, Sarah," Aunt Carol had insisted a few months ago, in the living room of our modest suburban home, which already felt like it was shrinking around me. "This is an opportunity of a lifetime. Think of what your parents would want, for you to be safe, provided for." Her voice was laced with a desperation that I only later understood was entirely her own. Every argument, every tearful plea was designed to corner me. I was 20 years old, legally an adult, but emotionally I was still an orphan trying to navigate a world without my anchors. The pressure was immense, a slow, crushing weight until I finally, exhaustedly, agreed. The fear of being completely alone and penniless, a scenario she painted with chilling detail, was a powerful motivator. Now, standing in a room that probably cost more than my childhood home, I felt more alone than ever. The deal was done. The papers were signed. I was Mrs. Sarah Sterling. In a few hours, the last of the guests would depart, and Richard would escort me up the sweeping marble staircase to our master suite, where my new life would officially begin. A life I wanted no part of. That's why, 2 days ago, I'd used the last $200 of my personal savings, money I'd earned from a part-time job at a bookstore, to buy a one-way bus ticket to a place I'd only seen on a map. A small, unassuming city in Oregon. My escape plan was pathetically simple. A worn duffel bag was hidden in the back of the guest room closet where I'd been getting ready. It contained a change of clothes, a toothbrush, my parents' photo, the bus ticket, and the $134 I had left to my name. It wasn't a plan, really. It was a prayer. "Tired?" Richard's voice broke through my thoughts. The party was thinning out. Only the closest family and friends remained. "A little," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "It's been a long day." "Almost over," he said, his thumb drawing a slow circle on my back. "Then we can finally be alone." The look he gave me sent a shiver of pure dread down my spine. It wasn't a look of love. It was a look of anticipation, like a collector about to finally place a prized and very expensive acquisition on its shelf. Aunt Carol glided over, her smile impossibly wide. "Isn't this wonderful? Everything is just perfect." She hugged me, her perfume cloying and sweet. "You be good to him, you hear?" she whispered in my ear, her tone leaving no room for argument. I just nodded, the lie catching in my throat. This was my last chance. It was now or never. The final guest was being escorted to their car. The music had faded. The silence of the huge house began to press in. Richard turned to me, his smile unwavering. "Shall we go upstairs, Mrs. Sterling?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I had to get away, now. Taking a deep breath, I put a hand to my temple. "You know, I have such a splitting headache. I think the excitement was just too much. Do you mind if I just take a few minutes in the powder room to freshen up? Maybe just sit in the quiet for a moment before we go up?" My voice trembled slightly, but I hoped he'd mistake it for exhaustion. He studied my face for a long second, his gaze analytical. I held my breath. He probably thought I was just a nervous young bride. "Of course, my dear," he said, his tone magnanimous. "Take all the time you need. I'll be waiting in the study." He gestured to a room with dark wood doors down the hall. "Don't be long." It was the opening I needed. I walked, trying not to run down the long Persian-rugged hallway, my ridiculously expensive heels sinking into the plush carpet. I didn't go to the powder room. I veered to the left, towards the wing where I'd gotten ready. The house was eerily silent, a maze of wealth and shadows. My borrowed diamond earrings felt like tiny weights pulling me down. I slipped into the guest room, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the crystal doorknob. The duffel bag was right where I'd left it, tucked behind a row of empty hangers. I kicked off the heels, leaving them on the floor like a final insult. I didn't bother trying to get out of the dress. It would take too long, and the zipper was impossible to reach. I just grabbed the bag, crept to the door, and listened. Nothing. Silence. Instead of going back the way I came, I remembered a service entrance the catering staff had been using. It was at the end of another long corridor, past the enormous kitchen that was now dark and quiet. Every creak of the floorboards under my bare feet sounded like a gunshot. The scent of leftover food, salmon, rosemary, baked bread, hung in the air, a ghost of the celebration I was fleeing. I found the door, a simple, heavy metal thing that was a world away from the ornate entrances at the front of the house. A wave of cool night air hit me as I pushed it open. I was out. The freedom was so abrupt, it was dizzying. I ran across the manicured lawn, the damp grass cold on my feet, the cumbersome skirt of my wedding dress catching on rose bushes. The moonlight made the white silk glow, turning me into a beacon. I felt horribly, brightly visible. A security camera on the corner of the house seemed to follow me with its single unblinking red eye. I didn't care. I just ran. The Sterling estate was surrounded by a high wrought iron fence. The main gate was a mile down the private drive. I couldn't go that way. I scrambled towards the side, where the fence met a thick grove of eucalyptus trees. The hem of my dress tore with a sickening rip as it snagged on the iron bars. I ignored it. I threw my duffel bag over the fence, then started to climb, my fingers raw, the beading on the bodice cutting into my palms. It was clumsy and desperate. For a moment, I was stuck at the top, impaled on my own ridiculous wedding fantasy. I could hear distant freeway noise, a sound of the real world calling to me. With a final, agonizing heave, I swung my other leg over and dropped, landing hard in a ditch on the other side. I landed with a grunt, scraping my arm on the gravel. I lay there for a second, gasping for air, the smell of dust and dry leaves filling my lungs. The dress was ruined, stained with dirt and grass, a long tear running up the side. I didn't care. I was free. I scrambled up, grabbed my bag, and started walking down the dark two-lane road towards the distant glow of the freeway entrance, where I knew there was a bus stop. The bus ride was a surreal blur. I changed in the tiny, foul-smelling bathroom at the station, stuffing the ruined $1,000 dress into a trash can. It felt like shedding a skin. In its place, I wore simple jeans and a worn-out sweatshirt. I looked like myself again, only not. I looked like a refugee. Huddled in my seat, I watched the glittering lights of Los Angeles fade into the darkness behind me. I had survived my wedding day. For the next 2 years, survival was the only thing I knew. I arrived in Cedar Falls, Oregon, with $97 and a gnawing fear in the pit of my stomach. I found a room to rent by the week in a rundown boarding house owned by a stern but not unkind woman named Mrs. Gable. My room was tiny, with a lumpy single bed, a dresser with a missing knob, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. The whole place smelled of boiled cabbage and old dust. But it was safe. It was anonymous. I got a job at the Pinecone Diner, a 24-hour spot off the main highway. My life shrank to the rhythm of that diner. I'd wake up before dawn, walk the 30 minutes to work, and spend 8 hours on my feet, pouring coffee, slinging hash browns, and wiping down sticky tables. My coworkers were people like me, people running from something or running towards nothing in particular. My best friend became Maria, a single mom working double shifts to support her 2 kids. We never talked about our pasts. We talked about aching feet, rude customers, and how to stretch a dollar until it screamed. I changed my name to Grace. Sarah Sterling was a ghost, a character in a story that wasn't mine. But she haunted me. Every time a luxury car, something sleek and black like the ones Richard owned, pulled into the diner's parking lot, my blood would run cold. I'd duck behind the counter, my heart pounding, until I could see it was just a traveling salesman or a local with a bit of money. I never answered calls from unknown numbers on the cheap pay-as-you-go phone I bought. I had nightmares where Richard would find me, his smile calm and terrifying, as he told me the game was over. The fear was a constant low-grade hum beneath the surface of my new life. He was a powerful man, a man who got what he wanted. I knew he would have looked for me. He would have hired private investigators. His pride alone would demand it. I lived in an ever-present state of looking over my shoulder. I never stayed in one place too long after work. I took different routes walking home. I paid for everything in cash. I became a ghost, leaving as faint a trail as possible. But as months turned into a year and then 2, the fear began to fade, replaced by a fragile sense of peace. I had saved up enough money to move out of the boarding house and into a small studio apartment above a flower shop. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I bought a second-hand armchair and a small bookshelf. I started visiting the local library, reading books like I was starving for them. I was slowly, painstakingly building a life, a real life, one made of scraped-together tips, the smell of coffee and bacon, the quiet joy of a borrowed book, and the friendship of a woman who understood what it meant to be tired. I thought I had made it. I thought I was finally free. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday. The lunch rush was winding down. The diner was filled with the comfortable clatter of cutlery and conversation. I was at the counter refilling the sugar dispensers, my back to the door. The little bell above the entrance chimed, announcing a new customer. I didn't turn around immediately. "Be right with you," I called out, my voice cheerful. "There's no hurry, Sarah." The voice. It was smooth, calm, and utterly familiar. My blood turned to ice in my veins. The sugar dispenser slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the counter and spilling a cascade of white crystals. I turned around slowly, my entire body rigid with a terror I thought I had left behind in California. He was standing just inside the door, looking completely out of place in the humble diner. Richard Sterling. He was wearing a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. He wasn't looking at me with anger. He was smiling, that same cool, confident smile from our wedding day. "It took me a while," he said, taking a step inside. "I'll admit, you were more resourceful than I gave you credit for. Cedar Falls, Oregon. Very clever. The last place anyone would look." The few remaining customers looked up, curious. Maria, who was clearing a nearby table, shot me a worried glance. My mind was screaming, "Run, get out now." But my feet were cemented to the floor. He walked towards the counter and sat on one of the worn vinyl stools, placing his hands flat on the formica surface. He looked around the diner with an expression of faint amusement. "This is what you chose? Over everything I gave you?" I finally found my voice, though it came out as a choked whisper. "What do you want, Richard?" "What do I want?" He chuckled, a low, condescending sound. "I want my wife back, of course. This little adventure of yours is over. It's time to come home." All the fear, all the paranoia of the last 2 years coalesced into a single hot surge of anger. "This is my home," I said, my voice stronger now. "And I am not your wife, not anymore." "Oh, but you are," he said smoothly. Legally, in the state of California, you are very much Mrs. Sarah Sterling. I came to collect what's mine." He said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly, as if I were a piece of luggage he'd misplaced. He thought he had me. He thought he could walk back into my life and drag me back into that cage. But he wasn't talking to the scared 20-year-old girl he'd married. He was talking to Grace, the woman who had worked her fingers to the bone, who had faced down loneliness and fear and built a life from nothing. "No," I said, looking him straight in the eye, "I'm not going anywhere with you." He laughed then, a genuine mocking laugh that grated on my nerves. "Don't be ridiculous. This has gone on long enough. You think this little job, this little apartment, is freedom? I can give you anything you want." "I don't want anything from you," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "I just want you to leave me alone." His smile vanished. The mask of the charming gentleman fell away, and for the first time I saw the raw, ugly pride beneath it. "You don't get to say no to me," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. "Do you have any idea what you did? The humiliation you caused? The marriage was important." "Important for who?" I shot back. "For my aunt, so she could cover her debts? For you, so you could get your hands on my inheritance?" A strange look crossed his face. He leaned forward, his expression almost pitying. "Your inheritance," he said with a short, sharp laugh. "Oh, my dear, sweet, naive girl, your inheritance was pocket change. It wouldn't have covered the catering bill for the wedding. Your aunt gambled it all away years ago. There was nothing left." I stared at him, confused. "Then, why? Why marry me?" And that's when he told me, the real reason, the truth that was so much more twisted and cruel than simple greed. "I was finalizing the biggest merger of my career," he said, his voice cold and clinical. "My new partners are traditional. They believe in family, stability. A bachelor of my age raises questions. A new bride, on the other hand, especially a sweet, tragic little orphan I'd taken under my wing. Now that's a story. It's good PR. It makes me look stable, trustworthy." "You weren't an acquisition, Sarah. You were a marketing campaign." The world tilted, all of it. The pressure from my aunt, the whirlwind romance, the opulent wedding. It wasn't about money. It was about image. I hadn't been a bride. I had been a prop. Richard saw the shock on my face and pressed his advantage. "So you see, it was never about you. It was business. And your running away made me look like a fool. It complicated things. Now, you're going to come back with me and we are going to fix the story." Maria had moved closer now, her hand resting on a heavy glass coffee pot. "Is this man bothering you, Grace?" she asked, her voice steady. Seeing I had backup, seeing the truth of his disgusting manipulation laid bare, I felt a final click of strength fall into place. "I'm not a story, Richard," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even me. "I'm a person, and I'm staying here." His face darkened with rage. He stood up, knocking the stool over with a crash. "You will regret this," he hissed, his composure completely gone. He looked at me, then at Maria, realizing he had lost control of the situation. He was a man used to boardrooms, not greasy spoon diners. He pointed a finger at me. "This isn't over." Then he turned and stormed out, the bell on the door jarring violently as he slammed it behind him. The diner was silent for a moment, and then Maria was there, her arm around my shoulders. "You okay, honey?" I just nodded, tears of relief and rage finally streaming down my face. I had faced the monster, and he hadn't won. A week later, a thick manila envelope arrived at my apartment. My hands trembled as I saw the return address, a high-powered law firm in Los Angeles. I thought it was a lawsuit, a summons, Richard's final act of revenge. With dread, I tore it open. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a petition for annulment, filed by Richard, citing desertion. He was cutting his losses, erasing me from his story just as he had tried to write me into it. But it was the second document that made me sink into my second-hand armchair. It was a cashier's check, not for millions, but for an amount that made my breath catch in my throat. $150,000. Tucked inside the fold of the check was a small, elegant note card, not with Richard's handwriting, but a graceful, feminine script. The note was short. "I am Richard's mother. I never approved of what he did or how he did it. This is the true remaining value of your parents' estate, before your aunt's mismanagement. He was told to give it to you. He never did. No one deserves to live in a cage. This is yours. Be well. Eleanor Sterling." I stared at the check and then at the note. All this time, I thought I had nothing. All this time, my aunt had lied, Richard had lied, and the truth had been buried under layers of deceit. He hadn't just used me, he had stolen from me, hiding what little my parents had managed to leave behind. And in an act of defiance I never could have predicted, his own mother had defied him and given it back. It wasn't a gift, it was justice. I didn't quit my job at the diner right away. For a few more weeks, I kept pouring coffee, kept wiping tables, kept walking home to my little apartment. I needed to feel the solid ground of the life I had built under my feet. The check sat in my dresser drawer, a silent testament to a world I had escaped, and a future that was now, truly, my own to write. I eventually enrolled in courses at the local community college, starting with business management. I wanted to understand the world that had tried to swallow me whole, but on my own terms. My apartment is still small, the furniture is still second-hand. But it's not a cage, it's a home. I earned it. Every single splintered, beautiful piece of it.